are all weirdos.
Weird science is the revolution. Weird science is the revolution.
Hello, all you weirdos. Jim here, and this is the best comics of the week for the week ending on January 28th, 2024. I almost messed that up somehow. It was a rough week, and the comics weren't so good either, right? Oh, my goodness. I didn't have a terrible week. It was pretty uneventful, but it was a rough week of comics. I will admit that, and here we are. So I have to pick some of these books. Would all of these books be the best of the week on a normal week? Maybe not, but we'll see what we're going into here. I have a book for DC. I have 2 Marvel and 1 Indie, and I'm sure you're scratching your head about what those possibly could be. But that kind of leads me into my next thing where please let me know what your best of the week is, because it's something that I think is a little more positive than a lot of the YouTube videos you see out and about. And maybe, I can convince some people to pick up something, or you can convince me. And it's not even just like, hey, he likes that, I'm going to go read that. There might be some books that maybe you were reading and fell off of. And now, oh my God, that sounds kind of cool now. Or maybe it is something that you didn't really get the idea of what it was about. But now when we go through it or read in the comments, you'll go, I'll give that a shot. I like that. Now, I will also tell you that each time we do this, I say, oh my God, this is coming out on Sunday, but it's going to be a Saturday show. Yeah, let's scratch that. It's going to be a Sunday show. It's going to have to be a Sunday show. Saturday, I end up doing a bunch of things, including our big DC Comics podcast. That takes up hours and hours at night. I always think that I'm going to be inspired to do this after that, but by the end of that, I'm drained. Plus, just as a little shout out, if you do listen to our podcast or watch these videos, our DC Comics podcast, which usually goes up on Sunday night on our regular feed, it comes out Saturday night on our Patreon, patreon.com/weirdscience. But that is something then when I get done recording, I got to edit that. And then I come in and I'm like, yeah, I'll do that tomorrow. So I think this is a Sunday show is what I'm saying. But we're going to get into this. And like I said, I got 1 DC, 2 Marvel, 1 of those indie books. I'm recording this in between the NFL playoff games, so here we go. DC first, Titans Beast World number 5. Written by Tom Taylor, art by Ivan Reis and Eduardo Pensica. I hear a lot of people don't like this. I'm going to try not to spoil too much, even though it is kind of, the end of the week, but we won't spoil too much here. But a lot of people were upset or still are upset. They think we're getting too much Amanda Waller. I saw a bunch of people say that. I disagree. And I disagree in the fact that a lot of the DC Comics events that we've gotten in the past couple of years, there's been no setup at all. You just end up, oh my God, Night Terrors. Holy God, where did this come from? Oh my God, death metal. Like all these things end up where the setup is usually just the first issue of the event. And nothing really seems like, oh, I saw this coming, or oh man, I didn't see it, but it was there. And that's something that back in the day was cool. You would have these little hints, and then the hints get bigger and bigger. And then all of a sudden, boom, event, and everything feels like it has some weight to it the minute it starts. And that's what I feel like we're getting here with Amanda Waller. When we get to this summer where it seems like the big event, Amanda Waller versus the superheroes, it's going to feel like it already has weight. It's going to feel like, oh my God, this is what all this has led to. And it should feel bigger that way. That's what I'm hoping. So I don't think we're getting too much. I just think that in this issue, we see the culmination of a lot of her plans that have been going on even before Death Metal. She ended up losing the Suicide Squad. She was on the run. At one point, she was hiding out in the War for Earth 3, which I don't know if people are referencing that anymore. But you still had that, right? But here we are, and she is pulling strings every which way to thou being part or head of the Bureau of Sovereignty, which is another thing that I like about this issue and like about what we're getting at DC Comics the past, say, year or so. We'll just say Dawn of DC. There's a lot of, connections. There's a lot of synergy between books. Books are starting to play along and writers are starting to know what other people are doing and connecting it in. You have the Bureau of Sovereignty that goes right in with Tom King's Wonder Woman book. Not loving the book, but I love the synergy. And then it makes you feel like, oh my God, here's the thing, too. I love the idea where you read a book and it makes you, oh, my God, this is from that book and that. And it makes everything bigger. I really, really like that. Again, I understand when people are like, oh, she keeps showing up and whatnot. But if you are reading all the books and if you care about the DCU as a whole, I think it's a cool deal. I think it's a great play. Now, by the end, you get a reveal of who the Dr. Hate is. Most people listening to this probably already know. I just don't want to spoil it because it's big. But that is also something that was set up earlier in the Nightwing book. It was set up in the Titans book, and it made sense to me, even if it's something that people had told me. I saw this 100 times before. Sometimes you end up having something that's really cool, and you get it a couple times because it's a cool idea. But in this, I think that it also sets up things going forward in the Titans book, which I feel like needs to be bigger. And then in general, it has something that even alludes to crazy, but, that dark future of Future State, which I think is averted now anyway, but maybe some of the things we'll see are still going to have it. It's just crazy. It's a big reveal. And some people were like, oh, I wish Dr. Hate was somebody else. And when you get down to it, I really want to know, like, who? Who did you wish it was? I've had a couple people who actually had some good ideas. If he's watching this, Common Sense was one of them. That was a really good idea. But most people don't have an idea. They just think that this idea isn't bad. If it's not going to be this, you're going to get, a multiversal Joker from Earth 208. Oh my God, it's Amanda Waller from Earth 732. Like, would that make it any bigger or better? I don't think so. And a lot of people, they end up where you have a mystery. Who's Dr. Hate? I actually bitched about it on our podcast, that it wasn't something I felt like you could play along with. Sometimes you can't play along, but when you end up finding out the reveal and then you think about it and say, okay, this was still set up. I couldn't really play along, but it was set up, then it's fine with me. I liked it. The Ivan Reis and Eduardo Ponsica art makes it bigger. I actually had a lot of fun. Penultimate issue. Next week, it's the finale. It's crazy having issue number 5 and then the next week having issue number 6, but that's cool. And when that happens, I've mentioned this to a million people. I'm going to mention it here quick, that I think that Garfield, I think that Beast Boy is going to be brought back to life by the frozen tentacle that is in that frozen universe that you had the Necrostar blasted off. You remember when they blasted or boom tube the Necrostar there, Gar was kind of as Garo, kind of fighting. And when the boom tube went closed, the severed tentacle remained there. I think it's on ice now, and I think they'll use that to fully regenerate Beast Boy. Whether or not you think that's great or stupid, if that happens, I've told people since I've said this from day one, from issue 1, I said it. You can go back and check the receipts here. If that happens, I think that if you haven't subscribed to the channel, you have to come back and subscribe, right? If it doesn't happen, I guess you just avoid me. Avoid me like my family does, like the plague. I'm telling you, I guarantee that it's going to happen. I've been saying it now for months, so we'll see. But I do think if you have been reading Titans Beast World, there's no reason why you wouldn't read this, but I've enjoyed the event as a whole, and I'm going to be doing a couple different videos with different people when this is over to kind of give, that whole, hey, this was Titans Beast World, and we'll kind of discuss that. That'll be on our channel. And others on YouTube, you'll see. But that's the DC book. Let's move over to Marvel. Now, if you're scratching your head, what could possibly be Jim's picks at Marvel? 2 books. What's he, nuts? Kind of. I mean, yeah, my doctors have said, confirm that. Tests and all. Yeah, I'm nuts. But what I'm going to give you here is a book that people don't like the writer. And I think that ends up kind of blinding them sometimes to maybe getting his best work. And this is Superior Spider-Man number 3, written by Dan Slott. Oh, my goodness. Everybody has a different nickname for Dan Slott. And I'll tell you, I laugh at every one because I hate his guts. I think he's a jerk. I think he's like just a jerk of a guy. He blocked me on Twitter because I said a joke to him. I like to joke around. He blocked me. I don't like him. I don't like him at all. But his one thing that I think he does great is Superior Spider-Man, and here it is. People throw shade at him because of that. Oh, all he can do is Superior Spider-Man. Well, if that's the case, then have fun with it. And it is that alternate deal. We have the Ultimate Spider-Man, where people told me over and over they were so glad that Jonathan Hickman's doing this Ultimate Spider-Man because they can't stand Zeb Wells' run. that gives them an alternate deal. Well, some people don't like Ultimate Universe stuff, and now this could be their alternate deal of it. Yeah, and even if you are enjoying all of the Spider-Man, I still think it's good. It is written, as I said, by Dan Slott with art by Mark Bagley. I think the art is good. And I'm not telling you that from the get-go of issue 1 that I was in love with this book. I didn't like the Spider-Man book that was more of a Spider-Verse book that this kind of came from. I didn't like it at all. My man Matt, who does the Spider-Man stuff on the Marvel podcast and does a lot of the Marvel podcasts in general with me, he likes Dan Slott and really likes most of the things, including that Spider-Man. He kept begging me to read it, and I didn't. And then I did finally because of this. But Spear Spider-Man, first 2 issues, I was kind of iffy. Last issue, especially, number 2, was a little bit too much Spider-Boy. It was a little too much of that, and it didn't feel like Superior Spider-Man. It felt like more, hey, everybody, remember Spider-Boy? We're pushing it. We have his own solo book. It felt like too much and not enough Superior. This issue changes that. This feels really like Superior Spider-Man, with the twist that there's Doc Ock teaming up with Peter, not in a great way, not in the good guy way that some people have problems with Norman and Peter, right? This is Doc Ock being Doc Ock, but he needs to use Peter because he done messed up as Superior Spider-Man. He ends up making this villain Supernova, and Supernova just doesn't know Superior Spider-Man to Adam, and it's just going against Spider-Man. So Doc Ock is using Peter, who has to pretend he's Peter, but with Doc Ock version of Peter, and it's fun. It's like that sitcom-y deal. Peter Parker trying to be himself, but through the deal of Doc Ock, and then Doc Ock losing his mind. But at the end of this issue, it looks like you might get back to actual 100% Superior Spider-Man. We'll have to see. I think it's a little misleading, but it does look like Doc Ock is pretty much putting on the helmets and going to start swapping brains again and stuff. So we'll see how that works out. But I had fun with it. And one of the telling things with books for me, because I read a lot of books, I have a ton of comic and manga podcasts. And so sometimes the bad thing of that is that you start to get a little sick of some things, or it feels like work, or it feels like you're going through the motions. I hope it doesn't sound that way. But sometimes when you're done a book or a podcast, you're actually relieved. You're like, oh God, thank God I'm dumb. I am dumb. Thank God I'm done. And then when you're sitting there, you're like, but when you read something, you're like, oh my God, I wish the next day, that's few and far between. And I felt like, man, I wish that this next issue was out now when I got done that Superior Spider-Man number 3. So again, I don't know if I'm going to convince people who really hate Dan Slott. The only thing that I can say too, as far as I can tell, he is hated because he's a jerk. People don't want to deal with him because he's just this like geeky, nerdy jerk. That's not as bad as what some other people have done, right? Of all the scale and scope of things, just being an annoying jerk might not be the worst thing in the world. And it is a shame that with social media, you end up having what is really the cliche or the trope. You don't want to meet your heroes. There are people who are jerks, but he's not like, he just is kind of annoying, right? That's just me. Now, if somebody's going to put in the you didn't know that he did this or that, whatever. Yeah, I'll see. And if there's more, but really, he blocked me for making jokes one time. I don't know what his problem is, but he loves that Twitter. The next deal on Marvel is something that surprised me. I, at one point, had a Star Wars comics podcast. We had it for years. We ended up getting sick and tired. The downfall started in the War of the Bounty Hunters. And then you kind of go and other things going on. You're like, yeah. And then we get to Dark Droids. And it was me and my man, Matt, that I mentioned earlier. We bailed. We actually decided, let's just do a bigger and better Marvel comics podcast because the Star Wars stuff is depressing us. But here's a Star Wars book. It's a side one. It is an adaptation book, and usually I don't love those either, but Star Wars Thrawn Alliance is number 1, written by Jody Houser with Timothy Zahn, with art by Andrea DeVito and Pat O'Leaf. And I liked it. I didn't read the Thrawn Alliances book. I read the original Thrawn stuff, and I loved it. That was cool. But ever since, and I think a lot of people are in my boat, they've kind of given Star Wars is kind of something that isn't as special unfortunately to me, because of everything that's happened, not just with the movies, but how, the other stuff, the fandom, all that rolled up into one, that it's just not as fun for me. But this was fun. And this almost made me want to go read an actual book, which I can't do anymore because I can't pay attention worth a crap. You should see me. But I really liked it. And I love Thrawn. Grand Admiral Thrawn is awesome. And seeing him and Darth Vader together is even better. You have this book where when it's Thrawn and Vader together, it's just solid gold. You go back and show Anakin stuff and that, and I'm like, okay, let's get back to the Vader. Right? It's really good. It involves a mission to the planet Batu, where they're going to explore disturbance in the Force. There's always some sort of disturbance in the Force, right? You ended up where Emperor Palpatine felt this disturbance, probably feeling a lot of other things as well. But when you end up having that, it's a cool setup to really just see Thrawn and Darth Vader interact with each other. And it's pretty awesome. I liked it a lot. I think everybody should check that out, especially if you haven't read the book. But it's pretty good. I've even seen reviews where people who have read the book and they're like, yeah, it's very faithful to the book and pretty cool. So I suggest everybody check that out. We're going to move on to the indie book. I think that people would probably guess this is the Ghost Machine one-shot #1. I'm not going to say that this feels like a complete comic. This is an advertisement to the Ghost Machine stuff coming up as this year of 2024 rolls along. It felt like to me, and I talked with Wes on Thinking Critical about this, I said that it felt like it could have been a free comic book day book. Maybe it's a little big for that, but it felt like that sort of thing, where you're putting it out there, you want people to get excited. And really, when you open this up, the art in it is incredible, and it's easy you can tell. I mean, some of the artists, Brian Hitch, Jason Fabok, Francis Manipool, you got Gary Frank on it. You have Brian. It's just crazy. I was going to say Brian Hitch again. I love Jason Fabok. He's one of my favorite artists, and we don't really get a lot of him. And now here he is. And you have written by Jeff Johns, does a lot of them. Peter J. Tomasi, Brad Meltzer, Lamont McGee, Maytal Jute. All these are pretty good. And when I was going through it, I didn't love every bit of it. There's some of the family stuff. I love Peter J. Tomasi. But that stuff with the Rockefellers, and that may not be for me, but that's what I liked about this. I wasn't aware of some of the things in this. And when I went to check it out, I actually got excited for what I didn't even know about. I know about Geiger. I'm kind of excited about Geiger, but, I know that that's going to come up. I know what Geiger's about. But when you're going through it and seeing like Red Coat or stuff like this Rook, I didn't know about those, and I'm like, this is pretty cool. Like, I think I might like these. And so by the end, you even have a bit in it that's the horror imprint. It is this big Ghost Machine universe type deal, and I think that it's something that if you are interested in indie books in general, I think you should check this out. You have a lot of character profiles in it. It's kind of cool. Like I said, it's not your typical comic. It's more of, I feel like it's like a free comic book day thing. The one thing I'll tell everybody, though, and some people ask me, like, it's weird when I said, oh, man, did you read that Ghost Machine one-shot? And they're like, they say, oh, I didn't. And what most of them said then, is it as good as the Transformers stuff? This is as good as the G.I. Joe. Not yet. This isn't that type of thing, but I didn't get that, like, overwhelming excitement that I ended up, or even the overwhelming excitement when the Transformers ended up showing up in Void Rivals. That's its own thing. But since that's so big, and that's kind of people wanted to know, is it like, it's not quite like that, but it could be. And there's some solid, right, a great artist on it. So I am looking forward to it. And I think that if you are even a tiny bit interested in what this Ghost Machine stuff is, I think you should check this out. I think it's well worth it. So that is that. That is it. I'd love to hear some other picks by people. I'm sure I'd rather have everybody give some picks than, rip on mine, but that's always going to happen as well. It always does. So, hey, I'm just Jim being Jim is what happens, which gets me in a lot of trouble during the week. It's not the greatest of advice. Never sit there. Don't ever make the bumper sticker, what would Jim do? Because the only way you'd want that is to do the opposite. Have that, like, what would Jim do? And then then do the opposite. Now, that'd be it's a long bumper sticker. But it'd be pretty cool. Yes. But yeah, I still love comics. I want to tell everybody that. I think while I talk to people, even people down with some of the companies, they're still sticking around though, because I think they're waiting for something to change for them personally or something to get better. And that is that little glimmer of hope for me that we'll all get back to just, oh my God, everything's hitting. We love it all. We're all dancing around the campfire. Somehow I'm thinking like we're all at Burning Man or something. We're all there tripping out. I don't think that'd be the greatest thing. See, that's the thing. Don't do what Jim would do. But that's that. Thanks, everybody. Let me know your picks. I'm going to get out of here, go watch some football. But thanks, and I'll talk to you all later.
You are all weirdos.
Weird science is the revolution. Weird science is the revolution.